the Gnostic truly believes that gender hinders perfection. This is what they believe. They want to perfect man by removing gender and also eliminating death. Okay, and this speaks directly to transhumanism, creating godhood. Also, we can think about Freemasonry lore too. All right, and America is draped, or should we say dripping with occultism, because just look at the history. We could start with just Freemasonry in itself. We could look at all of the different areas that this occult Luciferianism has had a major effect, and through these different areas, influencers and movers and shakers of these areas ended up starting the American colony. And we could find all of this stuff through NASA. You can find it through the Tool Society, through the Nazi movement, the Vril Society, which is connected to this, of course, the Theosophical Society. All of this stuff is directly connected. And then we can look at the Royal Society, which founded what we know as modern science, okay, through Francis Bacon. We can read his works on Atlantis, and then there's Benjamin Franklin and the Hellfire Club and that whole history. George Washington and Franklin both were Masons. Of course, you could look at the money. You could look at how Washington is designed. It's pretty creepy when you look at all these connections. Okay, none of this stuff can be denied. This is just truth here. This is just what we have to deal with. But it's a way to get an understanding of where America comes from, American culture. They cherry-picked aspects of the Bible, but these weren't Christians, right? The forefathers were not Christians, right? They were Luciferians. It's just a big black-white chessboard. You know, it's a game, the game of life, the great work. And Freemasonry is basically a mixture of mystery school religions, Judaism, and Gnosticism. And Gnosticism is just a bastard mix of mystery religions and Christianity. So basically, America was founded on Masonic and Gnostic principles, of course, with cherry picking of biblical aspects, and science as well. Science, as we know it, the Royal Society and the scientific method and the Enlightenment era were all occultists to some extent, Luciferians. So this is where our American society comes from. This is what birthed the American culture here. So I'm just trying to give a little history to some of this. But I'm talking about those who know, those at the top, those who are spending billions to push this on the population. This has to do with not only destroying man and trying to create this philosopher's stone through the destruction and removal of gender, but also this indirectly, or I would say directly, destroys Christianity and the Christian worldview, right? And all the work of Christ. This completely eliminates and refutes, it aims to at least refute the work of Christ, the need of Christ, the salvation through Christ. Right? They believe salvation is made through the philosopher's stone, through the perfection of man that can only be done by man through enlightenment. This has a lot to do with pretty much the crux of the Enlightenment era. I want to pull up what Jung said, because now this really gives you an idea of the hatred for Christianity and some of the energy behind this movement. So here we have alchemy. It is also called Hermetic philosophy, and Hermeticism is all tied into all of this. Though of course that conveys just a little as the term alchemy. It was the parallel development, as narcissism was to the conscious development of Christianity. So what he's implying here is that Hermeticism was parallel in its construction or in its development. It was parallel to alchemy, just like narcissism was parallel to the conscious development of Christianity. So what he's doing is he's equating narcissism to Christianity. It's so backwards. It's absolutely backwards, because when we really understand alchemy and understand Gnosticism, it in itself is actually narcissistic and a form of narcissism, because godhood, the endless search for godhood through your own enlightenment, becoming a god by way of yourself and only through yourself, I would say is probably the most blatant and most obvious example of narcissism. But it's weird how they kind of flip it. So narcissism was the conscious development of Christianity, of our Christian philosophy, of the whole psychology of the Middle Ages. So that's just really, really funny. He says, the idea lies concealed here that Christianity is only concerned with the problem of salvation, with the salvation of man, whereas alchemy is concerned with that of the whole of nature. Carl Jung in Modern Psychology, Alchemy, page 61. Now, unfortunately, we find this with a lot of atheists, we find this with a lot of agnostics and Muslims and non-Christians in general. They make these arguments against Christianity that are, for one, straw man argument, and two, they're proof that they've never really read the text. And if they did read the text, they didn't read it with intellectual honesty. They read it with ulterior motives, and their ulterior motives were based in proving it wrong, or they read it in just trying to look for mistakes, or just trying to find slip-ups or inconsistencies, instead of actually reading it and trying to understand fully what is being said, understanding context, historical information, so forth. They read it in a way that is dishonest. And when you study that way, when you have this biased style of studying, you'll always make these straw man arguments consistently. And what happens is, not only do they look foolish, but they end up deceiving a lot of people through their foolishness, because other people don't do the reading either and they just listen to them, right? So what we have here is an understanding that Jung doesn't really understand and get what Christianity teaches. It's not that Christianity is only worried about man's salvation because it's narcissistic. It's because everything else is in its proper order by way of God. God has created nature, he's created the laws of nature, he's created the order of nature and mankind, the order of earth, and God gave all of these things to man. So in a sense, everything revolves around mankind. When you understand this, there's no way to consider that narcissistic, because we understand who God is and what he did here. And we understand what he did and how he sees nature. For him to not understand that is proof that he just didn't read it honestly. And we see a lot of these types of straw man argument in non-Christian, non-believer groups. So I thought that was something important to pull out. And you could read some of these. The goal of alchemy is not merely material. It is partly in the beyond, and is almost exactly similar to the goal of Taoism, where the whole effort is directed towards finding or creating Tao. So we understand that all of these New Age philosophies and doctrines kind of meet, and they kind of share similar goals, which is godhood. Alchemy is the idea of producing a perfect and complete being. Alchemy, transhumanism, transgenderism, all of these things have the same philosophy behind them. And once you understand the root, the philosophy, the foundation or worldview, value systems, and so forth, everything will make a lot more sense. And unfortunately, people usually don't go deep enough to get there. They just look at surface things and they get caught up in the dialectics. But actually, all of these things are saying the same thing, and they have the same goals. We see here the perfect and complete being, a being which has redeeming effect and which has many names, panacea, the philosopher's stone. Just by their own words exposes the goals and the intentions and the inconsistencies.